I have flown from Phoenix to Minneapolis a few times. One time I was sitting by the aisle, and a guy was sitting by the window, and there was nobody in between. And we got up to about 25,000 feet, and shy person that I am, I introduced myself to that guy. And then he introduced himself to me. And we talked a little bit about what we did. And he said, "Why are you going to Minneapolis?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to speak at a banquet tonight." He said, "You're flying all the way to Minneapolis to speak at a banquet?" I said, "Yep." He said, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "I'm going to talk about surviving a plane crash." And you know, folks, when you're up at 30,000 feet, the interest level in that statement is huge. You know what he wanted to know? I'm not making this up. He said, "Was it this airlines?" I said, "No." And then I told him that I was with a group of people, Barb and I and our team and some other friends from Alaska, and we'd been invited to go from Nome, you see where Nome is, over to Providencia, and then up to a place called Lavrentiya. And there was a community of 3,000 people who had never, listen to this, never heard the gospel. The missionary, you would love to have been with us, because these people, there was not a Bible in a community of 3,000 people. No church, no Orthodox, Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, nothing. So, and there were kids that in the daytime, now you kids, all of you, you know all kinds of Bible stories. I mean, lots of them. The kids that came in the afternoons, they knew nothing. I mean, they didn't know who Jesus was. They didn't know he died on the cross. And so it was Christianity 101. And then in the evenings, we had evangelistic meetings where we witnessed, and we preached, and we read scripture, and we sang songs. It was fantastic. People were very receptive. The last song was done, and the last testimony was given, and our interpreter came to me, and I was talking to someone. He grabbed me like this. He said, "Dave, would you baptize Rosa?" And he got my attention. I said, "Oh, sure." He thought I was a pastor. And I didn't confuse him by saying no. And some of my Baptist friends overheard this, and they said, "How are you going to baptize Rosa?" I said, "We're going to baptize her with a Lutheran amount of water." Some of you got that. And if you didn't get it, I'm not going to explain it to you. So they said, "Well, how do you do that?" I said, "I need a dish and a little water." And somebody disappeared and got a dish and a little water. And we went into a closet maybe or something. I mean, this is not a church, folks. And there were about 6 or 7 of us. We read some scripture, and we baptized Rosa and her grandson. And I'll tell you, to be honest with you, we cried a lot. It was like a lightning strike, because Rosa was the head of the Communist Party in that community for 27 years. She was the least likely person out of 3,000 to become a Christian, if you're going to look at it that way. Next day, we got in our plane, and we flew from Lavrentiya to Providencia. Then we flew down to St. Lawrence Island, and then we were headed to Nome to refuel, because we were going to a Lutheran Church in Shishmaref. You see it up there at the Arctic Circle. There's one church in that village, Shishmaref Lutheran Church. We've been there a few times. And but 45 minutes into the flight from St. Lawrence Island, the right engine on our plane quit at 7,000 feet, and the left engine quit at 3,500 feet, and then we fell 3,500 feet in 3.5 minutes, and we plowed into the ocean 90 miles an hour. On the way down, those last 3.5 minutes, we were in a glider. The engines weren't working. You could hear everything in the plane. I heard one guy say, Lord save us. And then I heard somebody else say, Lord, help us. And then a guy in the back, I heard him pray, Lord, I want to see my family again. I mean, we're falling from the skies. We didn't know whether we're going to live or die. And right before we hit the water, 90 miles an hour, my wife Barbara prayed the most practical prayer you could ever pray at a time like that. She prayed, Lord, you could start the engines. And the answer was no. And that's when we got out of the plane in a minute, and a minute later the plane sank. And we found ourselves in 41-degree water near Sledge Island, long ways from Nome. And we had no idea whether we were going to live or die. We didn't know that in 41-degree water you lose dexterity in 5 minutes, and in no more than 30 minutes you lose consciousness. You drowned. You're dead. Well, we were spotted, and if you get our book or the video, you get a lot of details that are just fantastic. We were spotted after we'd been in the water 20 minutes. It's just a miraculous thing how that happened. Then, 40 minutes after we hit the water, 2 commercial helicopters came. They're not search and rescue, not Coast Guard. And for 25 minutes, they carried on what's been called the most dramatic air-sea rescue in aviation history anywhere in the world ever. So the only place to put us down was at the top of the island. I wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for that island. They had to put us down someplace. 1, 2, 3 at a time, 4, 5, 6. Finally, 7 of us got up there. And then we were repositioned in the helicopters, flown to Nome. Ambulances and pickups and I don't know what all took us to the hospital. And 2 astounded doctors and some nurses started working on us. They had been told that a plane went down west of Sledge Island, but most likely everybody's going to be dead. So they were just shocked when we turned up and we're alive. Well, we were a little bit shocked ourselves, quite frankly. And it's just such a great story. Oh, the roadie that we had, the young guy that plugged in the sound system, he was 23. Before we knew if we were going to live or die, he hollered Bible verses twice. And I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. God is our refuge and our strength, the very present help in trouble. Voice went out over the water. And then a little while later, he hollered a verse that we've all sung. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I remember thinking, that's the wrong verse. Thinking, what is there to rejoice about this? And to be glad, give me a break. Next Tuesday's the 31st anniversary. You know what I'm going to do on Tuesday? I'm going to make phone calls. I've been doing that for 31 years. I call every single one of the guys that saved our lives, and I said, thank you. We haven't forgotten. You risked your lives to save 7 people that you didn't know. It's a big deal. One time at one of our retreats, they showed the video toward the end of the week, and maybe Friday or Saturday night, to the clients. And I heard about that, and I came in, and I said, I understand you've seen the video. Do you have any questions? Oh, man. You know what one of the question is? How soon after this did you get on an airplane? I said, there's a one-word answer to that, and the answer is Nome. There are no roads or railroads going in and out of Nome. You're on an airplane or you're there, you're stuck for the rest of your life. So I think for Barb and me, 24 hours later, we were flying to Anchorage. Next day, we flew from Anchorage to Seattle and Seattle to Phoenix. And we got met by a little crowd of people when we got to Phoenix, and by Tuesday, every television station in Phoenix was at our doorstep. And we didn't know anything about PTSD. That's another story. A guy at a retreat that saw the video said, you know what occurs to me? That if there hadn't been a rescue in the Bering Sea, there wouldn't be a rescue going on at a retreat center in Arizona. And I grabbed the Kleenex. I said, yeah, it's probably true. We appreciate being able to share the story about the retreat ministry, about the plane crash rescue, about the songs that we love to sing. And we want to thank you very, very much for having us this morning. Part of the reason we're on the road is to raise funds to keep the lights on at the retreat center and to keep scholarships coming. And it's just a blessing that since 2009 when we had the first retreat, God has met the needs through people that have said, I want to support this ministry. If you're writing a check in the offering, write it to Shepherd's Canyon Retreat. You can use that envelope, and I suppose there's an offering plate back there someplace for a door offering.
Dave,
Is there?
There
Okay.
will be an usher with a basket for
Is
the
that right?
Shepherd's Canyon Retreat free will offering. But Dave,
Oh, sometime ask me about the guy that was holding a basket at the church in Winona. I don't have time to tell you that story. The whole congregation ended up laughing because of the size of the basket he was holding. It was huge.
Yeah.
And I thought, that basket's going to work just fine.
Yep, just fine.
Anyway, thank you very, very much for having us here at Redeemer.